Hey guys, I just want to touch in real quick, and I'm just out here going for a walk, but what's coming to my mind is I've just been going through the scripture, looking up just different times when God would intervene in a person's life. You know, a lot of times when God intervenes, like Abraham, Abraham was settled in a community, he had family, he had friends, he had everything going on around him. And then God just interjects in Abraham's kind of comfortable life and says, I want you to pack up everything and go in a direction that I'm going to lead you in. He didn't even give him like a exact location. He just told him just to leave where he's at and just follow. And you think of Moses, you know, after spending the first 40 years of his life in Egypt, and then the second 40 years, he is in a wilderness and he meets his wife and he has this community and he's with his in-laws and he's got everything around him. And then he has this burning bush experience where God is telling him to step away, step out of this and now go back to Egypt. And then he, you know, takes Israel out of the captivity from Pharaoh, and then they embark on this journey. And they're led by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. You know, they're not given a GPS location. They're not given a lot of things. All they know is that they're on this journey and they're going to the land that's flowing with milk and honey. And so many times, even when you think of the New Testament and when Jesus called Peter, James, John, and others, he told them literally, like as they are working and they're going about their jobs, they're going about their careers, they're going about their lives. And then Jesus seems to just intervene in their lives as they're just going about their everyday. And he's telling them, hey, drop your net, follow me. And it's just this illogical call that he gives to them. Like, how are they going to provide? How are they going to, supply all the needs? It's illogical. It goes against reason. And sometimes, even today, God still does that. I don't believe that that's the way it has to be for every believer. I don't believe that, that's the call in everyone's life. Jesus only said that to the 12 to follow him in that type of way. Like, for example, when the man that had 1,000 demons in him and Jesus casted out the demons out of him and they went into the pigs and the pigs went into the Sea of Galilee, that same guy wanted to follow Jesus like the apostles were following Jesus, everywhere that he went, living completely by faith. But Jesus says to that guy, no, don't follow me. Don't embark on this journey with me. You already got what you need. Now you just go in your own community and keep on preaching and keep on doing the ministry that you're called to do. There's so many stories. If we were to we could talk for the next hour about how God intervenes in people's lives. Well, when God intervenes in our lives and he calls us away to do something for him, it's not ever going to be easy. And I can tell you firsthand, when God calls us away and you hear his voice and he's leading you, he's guiding you, but everyone around you, not everyone, but there's things around you that could be telling you, no, don't follow him. No, don't step out in faith. Don't obey what he's telling you to do. And they could point out all the logical things of why we should not follow after God. We should not do what he's calling us to do. And we can easily cave into that. We can easily say to ourselves, well, when I look at the facts and I look at the logic and I look at the reasoning and I look at everything on the paper, no, following God is just, in this situation, maybe I've missed it. Maybe I've not heard clearly from God. And then what we do generally is we'll put out a fleece or we'll go back to God and we'll ask God again, is this something that you really told me to do? Is this a direction that you've really called me to be in? And then you get that peace or that word from Scripture that without a shadow of a doubt that you're following exactly where he wants you to be. Jesus, even when he stepped out from Nazareth and went to find John the Baptist, and we read about the baptism of John, and we read about the baptism of Jesus, and we read about Jesus coming out of the waters of baptism, and then we read about Jesus embarking on his ministry, and we see Jesus, going into the wilderness for 40 days, and we see him coming out of the wilderness in the power of the Spirit, and we see him doing miracles, we see him doing signs and wonders, we see him doing the most incredible miracles. And then we see him going from town to town to town to town, ministering, sharing the words that the Father put on his heart to preach. And we see him healing the sick, and we see him functioning in his call. But then when he gets to Nazareth, you know, he wasn't really well received there. They saw Jesus as just the carpenter. They saw Jesus as even the carpenter's son. You know, they saw Jesus as the teenager that was messing around, you know, not that Jesus was messing around, but they looked at him through the lens of he was just a kid. We know him. They knew everything about Jesus as far as him growing up from birth all the way through his years to the age of 30 years old when he stepped out into his messianic call as the Christ. And, you know, Jesus said, hey, even a prophet is not even welcome in his own home. And sometimes, you know, when God does speak into our lives and he gives us a directional word and he says, this is the way, you know, walk you in it. And you know God has called you down that track and that journey, and you got good counsel around you. You're not doing anything crazy. You've got scripture to back up the decision. You've fasted, you have prayed, you've waited on God. We've got to follow him at all cost. We've got to follow Jesus Christ at all cost. We have to follow him. Follow him. Follow his leading, follow his guidance, follow his wisdom, follow his counsel, follow his word. Make sure everything that's being done is in full alignment with scripture and with what God has told us to do, because in following him, he is going to bring alignment, he's going to bring favor, he's going to bring funding, he's going to bring his grace and his mercy. And I really want to encourage you that are listening in on this today, if you have heard the call of God at some point in your life, and you knew crystal clear that God was calling you to something. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a full-time ministry position. It could have been God had called you to, you know, study to be a doctor. Or God has called you to, you know, study to do mission work as an employee of some type of firm. Or God has called you overseas. Or God's called you as an evangelist or as a pastor. If you've ever had that call of God in your life, and like Jonah, you sat back and you said to yourself, there's no way that I could ever do that. There's no way I could ever fulfill what God's telling me to do. You know, Jonah thought to himself, the people of Nineveh, they don't deserve God. They don't deserve anything. And Jonah's thinking to himself, God, you're for our people. You're exclusively ours. I'm not going to reach people that are different than I am, that have been abusers to our community. They've raided our towns and our communities. Jonah was thinking logically, like it just went against everything in him to follow through on what God had called him to. And what happens? He goes in the opposite direction on a ship and he heads out towards Spain, Tarshish of Spain. And as he's heading out there, we all know the story, but God still got Jonah back on track. You know, I'm walking on these railway tracks right now, and I want to encourage you. You cannot lose the plan or will of God on our lives, even if it means that sometimes we've stepped off the track or we stepped off the course. God has a way